Hi, I'm Allie. Join me as I show you how to make these blue poppy earrings. They're a three-dimensional earring made with tilas and some seed beads along with an 8mm bead in the center. If you need any materials, go ahead and look below the video in the description. We'll put links there back to our site as well as the full list of materials. This video shows how to do the steps and create that three-dimensional atmosphere by tension and pulling in beads in smaller and bigger spaces, so make sure you watch. Let's get ready to get started and gather up your materials. To start our earrings, I'm going to flip it over so you can see kind of the back of what we're doing. And we're going to be building almost like a bezel. It turns out a little three-dimensional, hence that poppy look where it's kind of coming out from the sides. We are going to begin with our Tila beads. We also have 11 and 2 colors of 8s here. I have the earring flipped over so you can see the back of the piece. We're starting out with 5 of our Tila beads with one 11-0 seed bead between each. The first thing I'm going to do is put those on my thread and needle, and I'm using the crystal dragon thread size 8, so a thicker one. And I'm going to tie this into a loop. I have a size 11 beading needle that I'm working with as well. I'm going to tie this into a nice loop, pull it nice and tight, and that's going to be the foundation or the center of my piece here. We're going to fill in the center eventually with an 8.0 or an 8mm rather pearl. But for now, we're just going to sew through the next Tila bead and kind of pull that in a little bit there. And we have our group of 5. This group of 5, we're going to be expanding and doing another group of 5 on top of it. But the first thing I want to do is go in and put in my pearl. So I'm going to put my pearl kind of right in the middle there. It's going to start to create that little bit of a pool and into that rounded shape, into that bowl. And then we're going to go into the outer edge here. Coming out of my Tila, I'm going to go into the next 11-0 seed bead. From here, I'm going to grab my pearl, and this is an 8mm pearl. Go over the top of the Tila beads here, and we're going to go to the opposite side. Now, when you look across from that 11-0 seed bead, the opposite side is actually a Tila bead. So I'm going to go into the Tila that sits opposite that 11-0. I'm going to come out that Tila bead and go back through the same 8mm pearl. And we're going to do peyote, so if you see a little bit of thread here, don't worry about it. And then we're going to go back into the 8mm or the 11-0 seed bead, that our thread was coming out of. I'm also going through the next Tila bead at the same time since my needle wants to. And that kind of pulls that pearl into the middle of the piece. From here, I'm going to step up to the outer hole of that Tila bead. And we're going to go around the outer edge here doing an 11, 8, 11. And I'm using that pinkish color, that pinkish purple color between each one. Get that stop thread or that starter thread kind of out of the way. 11, 8, 11 goes on and into that next Tila. We're going to do this the whole way around. And then what we're going to do is go back into the middle and start a little bit of a peyote look to the piece around the pearl. So here we're going to the outer edge here. And the reason I'm doing this outer edge now rather than doing the peyote first is just because it's easier to hold on to. That's the only reason. If you want to do the peyote center first, you can totally do that. From here, I'm going through that last Tila bead that I need to. And then I'm going to step down and come out through the interior Tila here. So I'm going out and coming down through that first hole. We're going to go through our next 11-0 seed bead. Bring your needle out after the 11. And here's where we're going to start almost like a faux peyote stitch. We are going to add 2 8/0s between each one of our 11-0 seed beads, which is going to sit right in front of the Tila. So I'm going to pick 2 of my 8s, skip over the Tila, and sew through the next 11. Kind of pushing that pearl down a little bit. Go around, we're going to do this 5 times since we have our 5 Tilas. Going through just the 11-0 seed bead and pulling those down towards the center. Getting rid of that starter thread. If you want to, you can burn off the tail of that starter thread since we did tie it in a knot, or you can keep it on to tie after you are completed. Going the whole way around here, we're adding our 8s. And then as you go, if you get in a little bit of a tight jam, just kind of bend it a little bit. You can usually get your needle through that 11-0. Push that tila down, making sure the 8s stick towards the front. I wanted to record this whole thing just to show how they may bend and kind of turn as you're working on them. Go up through the first 11 that your thread was originally coming out of, and then step up as well through those first 2 8s. So you're coming out the 11 and going into the first 2 8s. Give a nice tight pull, bending those tilas down towards the center, and that starts to get our bowl shape. From here, we're going to go in and we are going to add 1 8/0 between each of our 2 beads here. So we have our 2 beads here. We're going to go in and we're going to add 1 more 8 and go through the next 2 8s. 1 more 8. This is almost like a peyote stitch through the next 2. It's going to look somewhat like a seamless line then of your 8/0 seed beads, making sure that those hang out there on the top. And then as we add the last one, we're going to go through the 2 that our thread were originally coming out of there. And then at the same time here, I want to step up. And by stepping up, I mean I want to go through that first 8/0 that we just put on singularly in that second row. We're now going to take 2 15s, or sorry, 2 11/0 seed beads, and we're going to catch that single 8. So it looks to be the third one in place that we just put in. And we're going to bend that towards the center of the project. 2 go in, bring that 8/0 seed bead kind of towards the middle, towards the pearl. You can see that my fingers are kind of pushing down on the piece, bringing it really to the middle. It'll pop the pearl out a little bit to the back, skipping over and just going through that 8/0 that we just added. Going around again. And see how that 8/0 comes from the outside. We kind of pull it towards the inside. And those 11/0s pull it even closer in. 2 more go on, going back through that original 8/0 seed bead that your thread was coming out of, and a nice tight pull and kind of press down in the middle to have those come out nice and tight in the middle of your piece. From here, from that middle, we're going to go and back our way down to come out again through that second hole of the first tila bead. So from here, I'm going to go down through the 8s that are right after it. From here, I'm going to go down through the 11 and through the tila bead if you can. Step up from the bottom hole to the outer hole of the tila bead. And now we'll get ready to put on our next level. Here we have the center of our flower, and I just want to show that it's a cute little design that you could stop here if you don't want to go bigger, or make a necklace where you're linking these together, that outer and inner. From here, we're going to add a second layer of our tila beads onto our thread and needle. Coming out of tila number 1 through that second hole, I'm going to grab my next tila. I'm going to go back through that same tila where my thread is coming out of. And what I'm going to do is fold that tila right on top of the last one with a nice tight grip there. From here, go back through the tila that you just put on through that first hole. We're going to add 1 8/0 seed bead, go through the 8 that sits in the middle. This is going to pull them again into kind of that poppy seed shape. Add 1 more 8/0. You're going to add a tila. You're sewing into the opposite side of the tila you're going to sit in front of, and just the tila there. So tila after the 8, that folds that down right on top. Your thread and needle then, push that down there, is going to go back through the new tila and out. And see how that gets stacked then right on top of there. So we'll do that again and see how it's starting to create that look of the layered flower. From here, 8/0 goes on. Go through the 8 that's already there. 8/0 goes on, along with your next tila. Sew through from the opposite side of your next tila that's in line, just the tila. So if the 11 wants to go there, sew kind of underneath it. Let that 8/0 sit down in that little crevice there. Pull your thread and needle and sew back through the tila that you just added. And see how you're getting almost like a peyote stitch here along the sides. We're going to continue doing that for 2 more sides, adding an 8, going through the 8 that's already there. If you can, try to make sure that you're going through the top of the 8, meaning that the thread that's already through the 8 sits below the thread you're putting on. Another 8 gets added, another Tila, opposite side, so on through, pulling that 8 down to sit right on top of that 11, right there, back through the Tila, and on. I've got one more to add here in its place to sit right on top. As you add in your last 8-0 seed bead here, the Tila is already there, so I'm just adding in my 8, sewing into that first hole of the Tila, and I'm going to step up to the second hole or the outer hole of that Tila bead. And again, see how you're getting already that 3-dimensional look to it, that these kind of want to fold in on top of one another. From here, we are going to start adding one of our 11-0 seed beads, sewing into the 8 that's already there, adding one more 8, this time in your alternative color. I tried to match mine pretty close to the pearl that's in the center. Coming out the 8, add one of your 11-0 seed beads, and then into the Tila. So you're doing a little bit of a peyote stitch again. As you're there, it's up to you whether or not you want to do the design of the top curvature here around. I'm going to do that a second time around just to give that a little bit more tension with the thread. So I'm going to go around the whole time right now, just doing my second hole, 11 into the 8, pulling that up a little bit, 8 between the 8s in that nice peyote form, 11 before, into that second hole. Continue to do so the whole way around, and then we'll go in and we'll add our outer flower edge to the top of the Tila beads. You can see here, here's that another layer of your poppy. And what we're going to do is get some seed beads to arch over top of the Tila. To do so, we're going to go back through the 11 that we just put on, through the 8s, those 3 8s there, through the 11. And then when we're coming out of the 11 here, we're not going to actually go through the Tila because this is going to make the seed beads sit a little bit nicer. We're going to go in and do 1, 2, 3 11s, followed by an 8, followed by 3 11s, and then skip over the top of the Tila and go into that next combo of 11, 3 8s, 11, and out. So once you're out the 11, again, skip over that Tila bead, add 1, 2, 3 of your 11s, followed by an 8, 3 more 11s, and around the Tila to the next curve. We're going to continue on doing that so you get 3 more little petals on top of your Tilas. As you create your last loop, you're going to go through that 11-0 and then 8-0, 11-0, and 8. Once you're through there, I'm not going to go through the 11-0 after the 8. I'm going to go through the Tila bead and come on out right after the Tila. So I'm going through the first hole or the innermost hole of the second Tila. And you may see your Tila beads kind of stacking on top of one another. That's okay. That's the effect that we want to give it that curvature and that 3-dimensional beading. I'm going to add my wire guard back here because I want my flower to really sit that it's coming out of the ear. You can obviously add it at the top here, or again, if you're doing a brooch or a necklace where you're adding them together, you can add them kind of wherever you want to on the piece itself. We're going to add our wire guard to the back here, going through and doing 1 and 2 of our 11-0s, followed by a wire guard or a wire guardian or a wire protector. We're going to go up through the one side of the wire guard, down through the opposite side, shorten my thread here, add 2 more 11s, and so back through that same hole of our Tila bead. I'm going to reinforce this, always making sure that your thread stays in that wire guard, going back up through my seed beads, back up through the wire guard, around the wire guard, down through the seed beads. A little wiggle. You need to. Make sure it's nice and tight. Down through the tila. That locks it in place. And now all I have to do, oops, see how that thread went right there out of the wire guard? I'm going to lift that up a little bit. Pull that into the wire guard. There's a good example here. Kind of pull it over. Once it's at the top there, then you can pull it nice and tight. And then we're going to go back down through the tila, weave through so my thread ends get to the same side, burn off the thread ends, and simply add your ear wire onto your wire guard to finish up this blue poppy earring. Thanks so much for joining me in creating these fun blue poppy earrings. You can do them in all different colors. I did them in blue because that way I can see your own creations in our Facebook group for Beading and Jewelry Making. Make some blue ones, orange ones, red ones, all kinds of different colors. Remember, if you do need supplies, look below the video. In the description, we put the links there to get back to our website with a full list of materials. Also, if you haven't yet, subscribe so you don't miss anything from us here at Potomac Beads. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and stay tuned for more inspirational designs.